Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, talking about switching our roles. So I believe now I will have to invite then Tashi, yourself, moderator so far, to now be a presenter. And I think Tashi, I think if I remember very briefly from your brief, Tashi is basically one of the senior female journalists of our national, news agency, the Kuensel. At the moment, I believe you are, what is your position at the moment, Tashi?
Assignment editor.
Assignment editor, yes, yes. And future editor and the future, leader of the Kuensel paper. I think Tashi, I can't find her brief, but I think from what I know, because we have always been working together and always been, having conversations on this particular topic, because Tashi has always, I think, stayed engaged in this area and stayed very interested. And I think she's been following the elections and how women are doing, and also, following our own progress as well as BNEW. And I think she's always been one journalist who's been very appreciative of us about the establishment of BNEW, ever since, especially I think after her going to the field and listening to women there on the ground who have, acknowledged our existence and appreciating our role. So thank you. In fact, Tashi, that was a very nice feedback for us as well to hear from you. And thank you again for mentioning that as a reminder. Because I think this keeps us, in fact, very deeply motivated to continue with our passion to serve this mandate. So Tashi, may I now invite you to actually, talk to the audience to share about the role of media in, promoting, women in elections and women in leadership, women in local government in particular, since we are talking in the context of local governments. What is the role, that media can play as far as you can see, and from as far as your own experiences go? If you have anything to share, please.
Lasla, good morning, everyone. Again, it's such a privilege for me today here to be a part of this conversation, both as a moderator and now as a speaker. For our friends who have just joined the live session, I think we are, this live conversation is organized by Center for Local Governance and Research here in Thimphu and Center for Study of Democracy in Westminster University in London. Our topic is on gender and development with a special focus on women's participation in local government elections. Although I am not an expert, I am passionate about women empowerment and also women's participation in decision making. So the moment Tashi Dema and Tashi Sangye asked me if I want to be part of this, I said I accepted it because I am very passionate about this topic. Because I've always believed that, like I said in the morning, I've always believed that no development will be meaningful if it's not gender inclusive and gender sensitive. And I sincerely feel that participation of women, especially in local governance, is very important because we're like similar. And also in the context that, like, I'll be repeating a lot of things, I guess, but with more than 58% of our women children, I feel that if we have women leaders in the local government, I think the interest and concerns of women and children will be addressed more. So to discuss this, since I am asked to talk on the role of media to promote women empowerment and participation in local governance, I think I'll break this conversation into two parts. Firstly, on the role of media in Bhutan in this age of social media, and then only get to the specifics of how media could promote women empowerment and participation in local government elections. I will have to admit that the opinions I share here are purely my own opinions, and it does not reflect that of the organization I work for, or Kuensels, or of any media fraternity of, in the country. So what is the role of media? While different people have different expectations from the media, I can deduce the role of media to three important roles right now in this age of social media. The first one is to inform and educate the public. While many people believe that there is no need for mainstream media today, especially because we get news on social media. A lot of my friends, relatives, associates have told me that, okay, what's the role of mainstream media? Because we get news on Facebook, on Twitter, on WhatsApp, on Telegram. There are groups where people provide news to each other. But then, and even our friends in the rural communities, they get information through WeChat. But then I keep saying that uh, when when there is so much of news, when social media is flooded with fake news, the role of mainstream media is to educate and inform the public, because by verifying and authenticating what is there on social media, we still, our role is still important. The second role I feel is media's important role is that media provides checks and balances. In democratic Bhutan, the role of media is to ensure that policies and developmental activities benefit all Bhutanese people, even in the local governments, when GUPs, Mangmis, Sopas, or even for that matter, Dzongkhag officials, whenever they uh, whenever they plan or implement projects or activities, that project or activity should benefit everyone in that community. And the moment someone feels that they are left out, or that project or activity favors them, then they confide to media. When media writes about it, in an ideal situation, concerned authorities or concerned agencies are expected to look at it and correct and act accordingly. But in Bhutan, that with the lack of accountability culture in our society, that does not usually happen. But in an ideal situation, that is supposed to happen. And the third role is that media still reflects society and culture. Quality journalism would help media be the public voice, and it would help the society progress meaningfully. So before we discuss on the role of media in promoting women empowerment and their participation in local government elections, it is important for us to discuss the status of women leadership in Bhutan. Phuntshok had pointed it out uh, categorically, but just a reminder again, we know that women are underrepresented in the local government. Past elections have shown that although there are more women voters, that does not translate to votes for women candidates, both in local government and parliament elections. That could be because of the structure discussing since morning. In the 2016 local government elections, like Phuntshok said, only 11% of women candidates were elected as local government leaders, of which only two are GUPs. We have listened to GUP Pema Wangmo, where she said how much as a woman leader she can do for the women and children in the community. Likewise, in the 2018 parliament elections, only 14% and 16% of women candidates were elected in the National Assembly and National Council, respectively. Like Phuntshok said again, Bhutan was ranked 131 out of 153 countries in the Global Gender Gap Report 2020, which uses indicators like political empowerment, health and survival, education attainment, economic participation, and opportunities to assess the extent of gender parity. Phuntshok had mentioned that this has been dropping, and I must admit that media in Bhutan could not do much to promote women participation, both in local government elections and parliament elections, but that is mostly because the main role of media in any election coverage, as prescribed by the Journalist Code of Conduct or the particular media house key rules, and also the rules and regulations prescribed by the Election Commission of Bhutan for election coverage, it mandates media to do balanced reporting and ensure that all candidates get receive a fair coverage. So media cannot afford to be biased. So there's no way that we can promote a woman candidate over a man during the elections. Media same level playing field for all candidates, irrespective of their gender. So although there are very less women participants, we cannot, we have to treat women candidates equally. So when we write, there are less, we tend to write less about women candidates because the candidates are also, the women candidates are lesser in number. So which results in less visibility for women candidates. To cite an example of how difficult it is for media during election coverage, in the recent Phuntshok Chhoden election, Nalu, our Kuensel reporter in Phuntshok, he wanted to write about women candidates, but it is very difficult because we have to ensure that the article does not promote the women candidates over the male candidates. Our reporter there had to tactfully find a news spec and write about how the women candidates, who two of them are university graduates, so they are vying for super posts, and how they are facing the tough competition. But when you read the stories, it's mostly about the women candidates. But then, like I said, because of the need for balance and equal coverage, we have to find a new spec to it. So why are women leaders important? Like I said before, participation in local government is important as elected women would represent the interests of women and children. Equal representation of men and women in the LG is also an indication that there is justice in that community. Women representation is also necessary for women to have confidence in the system. Although the votes, although women do not vote for women more, according to the past key election results, and like Lemo had specifically said that women are not supporting women, but when we have women as GUPs or as Mangmis or as Sopas, I think they have the confidence in the system. Once elected nationality, there is a confidence in the system that, okay, they might represent our interests there. So elected leaders also become role models, like Phuntshok and Lemo and also Gapema mentioned about it. Right now, when we go to the rural communities, as a reporter, when we go, and if you ask them, if you ask our young girls there, what are their ambitions or what they want to become when they grow up, most of them would say teacher or health official, a nurse, because that's role models for them. So when we have more local leaders, when we have GUPs, more women GUPs, mummies and sopas, I think this would inspire our girls in the rural communities to become a local leader in the future. So women leaders are also important to achieve gender parity. So now to coming to the specifics of how media in Bhutan can promote women empowerment and women participation in local government elections now. We can do that, media can do that by sharing success stories of women leadership in the country and educating the general public on why women leadership is important, to have the needs of women and girls addressed. We could also do stories on importance of gender responsive governance in the local governance. Media can instill among the public the importance of women participation in decision making, stressing the importance of women's role in development process. Since local government plans infrastructure development, if women participate in decision making, women would understand cross-sectoral issues and shift mindset of planning and governance. To cite an example of how Gapemong said in the morning that as a woman, she understands the issues and concerns of women. So when she plans and when she allocates the budget, she could do accordingly. So if media could pick up those stories, I think that would help. Media could also attend Gyok meetings and village village Gyok meetings in Gyok and villages where, like Gapemongmo and Lemo mentioned, that although the number of people attending the meeting, there are more women attending the meetings, the participation is very less, and then thereby the meeting lacks meaningful participation. I think media could do a story on why that's happening and how that could change. The broadcast and radio, which is still powerful in our context, I think broadcast and radio could run programs on why women participation is important. Broadcast and radio could also do programs on in places where, in communities where women participate, and how things are doing there, so that we encourage women in communities where they are not participating in meetings, in zombies, or coming forward to come contest in elections, so that they be inspired, and so that they would also be interested to join. Through positive stories, media could also educate the stakeholders, change their mindset on women and leadership. Media could also highlight the social, cultural, and structural barriers for women to participate in LG elections, so that government and relevant agencies work collaboratively to make it conducive for women to come forward. Media could do stories on how government, NGOs, CSOs, international NGOs in the region support women to participate in government and facilitate participation. So that can be used as case studies, so that the agencies here also to replicate success. And also encourage women's voices. Like Lemo pointed out, she makes a point to always ask women their opinions. So when I wish and hope that our colleagues in the media fraternity, when we go out for reporting, if we could get interviews whenever from women, I think this might help our women gain confidence to come forward. Besides sharing their opinion, it will also help them to gain confidence and also come forward, because they might feel that, okay, because their opinions are being asked, it might assert their importance. Negative media representation, which are not intended, impact women from contesting for elections, both in local government and politics. So while media should be sensitive, affected individuals should also write to the media house and also to the particular media person, so that such things are avoided in the future, and then other women dates are also not impacted because of such coverage. I think that's it. I will end the presentation here. Wishing all the women who intend to contest for the upcoming local government election and Samduzongkha Thomde elections all the best, and also hoping that, requesting that our men would support their wives, their sisters, their families to join local government elections and also parliamentary elections, and also support women as professionals. You, team Center for Local Governance and Research here in Thimphu, and CST in London. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tashi, for a wonderful presentation. In fact, I think it was a very comprehensive, by way of addressing almost all the things that, in fact, I would have liked to ask you in terms of the role of media, and also how you see how that can really help in support the mandate of women's participation in local governance. And I think all of us know and we acknowledge, particularly I think for BNEW, since our slogan and our running slogan is really strengthening the voice and visibility of women as change agents, as agents of change. And I think in order to particularly work on, I think, visibility and voice of women, I think it goes without saying that the power of media, I think, needs to be used a lot more in influencing and transforming the mindsets and attitudes in society. And I think we all know how powerful media is in influencing, people's perceptions and views, etc. So in that sense, I was wondering, for instance, one particular time when it is so important to, focus and, give much more attention to the visibility of women, the presence of women participating in elections, is closer to the elections and during elections. And given the norms or given the rules of the house, that you have in terms of coverage of elections, like you mentioned the example of the Thomde election, story in Phuntshok. How do you think that can, how do you think we can learn from this Phuntshok Thomde story to do it better now, let's say for the upcoming local elections, which will be happening, the third local elections in this country will come up somewhere towards the end of this year. It may be in November or December. And I think we are all right now working very hard towards that. And I'm very concerned, about, because on one hand, we as BNEW have always relied on the power of the media, and we've always tried to work with journalists. And ahead of every election, as you know, we've always tried to bring journalists together to, do some capacity building, sensitization, and to try and work together as partners in promoting, women in elections. But after this, incident that happened in the Phuntshok, Thomde elections, I'm a little bit concerned. So, I think the voice and visibility of women is in many ways, we work on the ground, but I think that actual voice and the visibility is I would say, in the hands of media to actually make or break. How do you think, that can happen, that can be challenged, and, really, how can we work around it to make it better for the upcoming elections? Any, maybe from your own personal experiences, or, just thoughts that you have right now?
I think making a lot of us in the media, I think it has become a cliche to call ourselves young, but then a lot of us are inexperienced. A lot of us are not, although we understand the importance of women in decision making, I think when it comes to when it comes to election coverage, because of the prescribed rules and regulations that are already there, it becomes really difficult for us. But then, in the Phuntshok Thomde coverage, I think we can look at the news spec and then cover the story, but give a news spec and then ensure that, okay, there is balance. So I think how we can do that? I think first thing, it's the capacity again, coming back to the capacity building of the media professionals, I think, because a lot of us, like I kept saying, in experience, and a lot of us still need trainings. A lot of us still needs to understand the gender lens more carefully. Capacity buildings by agencies like BNEW and other relevant agencies, I think would really help. I think even in the past, I think such trainings have helped our reporters. A lot of our reporters are mindful, but I think when it comes to sensitivity, we need constant reminder.
Yes.
Because we get carried away. So I think it's very important to train and to develop the capacity of media practitioners in the country during the election.
Okay.
I think that's the way out. I can see it now.
Yeah. Yes, Tashi, I would also agree in terms of, working with the journalists on the capacity and gender sensitivity, because I think probably even our participants in the forum would agree that when you compare how, the media coverage was of the women, especially women candidates, in the first parliamentary election of 2011 and the first local government election of 2011, when you compare that to 2016 LG elections or the 2013, and 18 parliamentary elections, in terms of how the journalists and media covered and highlighted women, was really toned down, because in the earlier, especially in the first parliamentary and second parliamentary elections, that was before before BNEW was active, the coverage by some of the journalists of some of the female politicians were very mean and very nasty, actually, giving them titles such as auntie and all that stuff, So I think that has really improved. And I think we are all the time monitoring and observing from the stories done on women that journalists who have been through, capacity building make a difference in how they cover the women. So I think I would agree with you in terms of the the constant regular, because there's a huge turnover of journalists. So we notice ourselves, for instance, prior to every election, when we were conducting those trainings, we found that the faces of journalists had changed, So there's a huge turnover. So it means that organizations who support organizations like us need to be aware that these activities, because faces of journalists keep changing, and the importance role that media plays cannot be undermined at all. The second question I have to you, Tashi, is on like you mentioned also about the need and the role that media can play in terms of doing success stories and educating the public with positive stories on women, etc. But would you agree that more needs to be done in that area in terms of really trying to de-stereotype, break down and challenge the gender stereotypes by promoting, digging out, and because sometimes I think it needs a lot of deep interviewing, and really digging deep with women leaders. Sometimes women leaders are constantly challenging these gender norms and gender stereotype norms and views and belief systems in the work that they do every day. But I think sometimes they're just doing it and they're not aware that they have done it. So I think it takes some skill in journalists to really dig deep and then highlight those stories and those aspects of the stories. So I think journalists need to learn to dig deeper and bring out the stories where women are constantly, or aspects of the stories through which they are challenging and upholding some of the new norms, and highlighting the importance of how women need to challenge. And so I think for media, I feel, would you agree that there's not enough being done in terms of highlighting and promoting stories which are really challenging the gender stereotypes?
Yes, like I said earlier, I think I will admit that as someone who has been in the field for last 16 years, I will admit that media could not do much to promote women empowerment and also women participation in local government elections and also in politics. And like I said, it's mainly because of the prescribed rules and regulations we have. But then I will agree with I will totally agree with when that there is a need for media to do in-depth stories. There's a need for media to go to the grassroots and talk to women leaders or women and get their point of view. It's very important for us, like Gappe Momo mentioned about how the budget allocation she has planned for women and children in the community. I think I would also want to request the viewers here or our people who can, like, if you know anything like that in the communities, or if you feel that, oh, that could be done, if you could share with media persons, I think they will pick up the stories. A lot of times we tend to we miss out those things. And like said, yes, media needs to take the gender lens, look carefully, and then do in-depth stories. I will agree. But then if people could also share us, and then I think it will help. When media does the story, I think in the end it will help only the community.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Because I think sometimes the more gender sensitive initiatives that the women leaders are taking up, or any other extra special initiatives for the community generally, whether it is for men and boys or whether it is for women and mothers, that the women leaders are doing, it may be taken for granted by the communities. They will think that it is part of their plan. They're just doing it because they have to. So I think when media helps to compare and contrast those stories, and actually let those communities where there are women leaders understand and realize and acknowledge that they are so fortunate to have women leaders, because if not for the women, these sort of initiatives which have been thought of and which have been bargained and negotiated and with extra investments of time and negotiations that the women leaders are taking it up. I think with the help of media, I think that needs to be highlighted so that people in the communities do not take women leaders for granted. That is appreciated, and then next time they stand for elections, whether it is themselves or other young women who come forward, I think people will be more willing to grant their votes to women. Okay, one last question that I have for you, Tashi. Again, I think in some ways you have mentioned, but I would like you to pointedly answer this question, which I often hear from our women leaders, both from local government, also in the parliament, that journalists tend to, and I think you probably and viewers as well would agree, that when you go through our papers every day or watch PBS every day or listen to the radio or whatever, I think you find that journalists tend to, frequently, the coverage of, let's say, male leaders, be it in government, be it in elected positions, be it wherever. I think the coverage of men tend to be much more frequent, and women leaders are less covered, so that I think needs to be improved, number one. Number two, I think it's also the aspect or the quality or the nature of the coverage when it happens of women as well. I think that needs to be thought through so that it's more professional. The same questions that you ask a man should be asked to a woman, and there should not be special questions to women about, okay, so how do you manage your work, how do you balance your family responsibilities with work, blah blah. If you're asking that for women, you should also ask that to men. So I think that aspect as well, would you agree that there needs to be, is that an unfair assessment by, because women leaders have often pointed out to us in our BNEW forums that the coverage of men is far more frequent, and women, because in the end, I think as leaders you want to be seen and heard, because unseen is unheard, and often unheard is also unseen. And I think for women, I think globally and throughout this whole journey of gender empowerment, I think the major issue that we are working on is the invisibility of women, and the fact that women are unheard. And I think that's where media plays a big role. But current assessment is that women leaders, even if they may be active and they may be doing things and speaking here and there, but I think their coverage tends to be more. If you cover a man once, you need to cover a woman thrice, because at the moment the representation of women is that low. So if you equate that, I think women's coverage needs to be far more in the media than it is right now. So would you agree that you need to do more on that?
Yes, I will agree and I will disagree, both. Firstly, I agree that yes, there is less coverage on women, and I think that is more because there are less women leaders. Then when media covers it, there is, because there are less more male leaders and women. Then when we cover stories, then they're like we cover more on the male, and then thereby it leads to less visibility for women. Like at a personal level, as a professional, yeah, I don't think media can do that. But then how can we do it if women in the community, like Gappe Muangmo or any other Mangmis or Sopas or even civil servants, the moment they feel that, okay, the woman is doing something extraordinary there, if they let the media know, I think the media will cover that story. Mm-hmm. But then a lot of things, like I said earlier, a lot of things are being missed out because media don't know. I think that's not because media do not want to cover women as such. It's not discrimination. It's not about any discrimination, but I think it's about because women do not know. Why do we cover a lot of corruption stories, a lot of complaints? Because people come to us. Like the moment they are affected by some plans, activities or projects, or the moment they feel that, okay, they are being left out, then people come to us or they call us and then they ask media to do stories. So in the same way, if whenever there are positive things happening, if people could share that positive stories, I think media could do it. And then I think that will bring a lot of positive stories in the community.
Yes.
And
Thank
then
you so much. I think let me say this before I forget, because you just mentioned the element of corruption, and that actually, I wanted to then immediately highlight to you that that is one area which probably you could do a very good story on, both by print and broadcast, to really highlight the fact that if you look at the data on corruption in local governments over the years, now we are heading towards the third local government elections. And over the years, over the last 15 years, if you look at the data, not a single woman leader has been taken to court, or or a re-election was held because she was corrupt and she was suspended. No. So I think those sort of stories really need urgent attention and highlighted again and again while you still can cover them, so that people in the public get educated on that. Since you need to inform and educate, I think this would be one area where we could do with some help from you. Sorry for cutting you there. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's it. I think in terms of asking the questions of how you balance your professional and personal life, I think a lot of people misunderstand it. I think from the journalist point of view, I think they asked it because they feel that, okay, women are taking this extra initiative, they are doing this extra work. I think no journalist in the country asks that question in the context that, oh, they don't ask the question to demean the particular person. I don't think so. But I think they asked because they want to know, okay, how they are balancing it. So maybe I think if we take the question positively, I think that I think the question is supposed to highlight how the woman is doing the work, personal work, and also the personal responsibilities and also the professional responsibilities, how she is managing it so better. Like, because male don't have to do all these things. I think the questions are not being asked. I think I will end here, just requesting our women leaders to be role models, so that a lot of our girls can look up to us, and then a lot of things can change in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Tashi. And now I hand it back to you.
I think that's it. We'll hand back to Tharchin Mola.
Yes.
Tashi, Tharchin, or
yes, so baton is passed on to Tharchin now. Tharchin or Sangi, I don't know who. Who is the next speaker?
So thank you so much, Phuntshok, for moderating and also being and agreeing to speak on the participate in this important conversation. And also thank you to Tashi for being a wonderful moderator and exploring the nooks and crannies of an important discussion that we've continued to have for quite some time, and I imagine would go into the future as well. But also thank you to all the participants for agreeing to be part of this important conversation that we often forget, because when you talk about women, it is also a tendency to think that this is a social issue or a community issue, and we pretty much forget quickly the other part of the discussion that is often not really explicitly said, but when you talk about women, about our society, about a family, and so thank you so much. This is where originally the plan was to have Dr. Nitasha Kaur from the Center for the Study of Democracy, University of Westminster, our partner, to deliver the concluding remarks, but something has come up and she's not been able to participate, and therefore I'll be filling in for her. So I having listened through the conversation this morning, we had the Gapema beginning of share her experiences of being a local leader, and the kind of natural was focusing on issues in a local government context, like teenage pregnancy, alcohol concerns, and basically what society would refer as softer issues, I suppose, of society. Also, when Lemo took us through the challenges she had as a long-serving administrative officer in the Gyeok, and also the sort of expanse influence that Gyeok admins have, given now the number of 73 out of 150 plus gaos, and various issues that our women confront in being equal participants of society, given that about 50% of the population are women. So that's why I think when Phuntshok shared about the growing expanse of civil society and engagement of women in there, and also when Tashi spoke about the media's inability to really specifically support women candidate elections, and how the laws of the country doesn't really allow them that flexibility, because at the same time, while we are there to support women, we also understand that there are issues about being balanced in reporting to society, because it does have a sway over electoral outcomes. And so given all of that, I think we do understand that the challenges continue to pose and hold our women back in becoming equal participants of development in society. But I think the good news is, as much as in local government, also beyond local government, in the national governance, we have seen the space for our women leaders grow, engagement of thoughts and ideas from our women also grow gradually. And I think that is a story of inspiration. While it's easy to see it in abstract, I think specifically in the local government's context, what can we do? And I thought that's in that area, that's where the government and agencies concerned may be interested to listen in on the conversation. Example, when Tashi talked about what could media do, I think when it comes from one of the FRAT members, it's palatable and probably more digestible, because I think then we also talk about the independence of media and how many people would have wishes of how media should operate in society. But I think it is also pretty much within the fraternity themselves that they have a debate as to how to go about doing what they feel is just for society. Phuntshok, I think you touched a very important issue when you talked about civil society and partnership with the government. And I think that is where an agency like yourselves, BNEW, has done a lot for empowering our women. And I think this is a testimony, because participants here have echoed what people in the grassroots feel. And I think your hard work over many years has also is starting to show fruition, because Pema acknowledged that. And I think you've also passionately described about how the first Zongda of having a Zongda in a neighboring district actually had a cascading effect on actually seeing the benefit of having women leader, and which led to the first Lady Cup getting elected. It was also inspiring to see that, as much as social construct exists, it is also within the reach of society to deconstruct it and reconstruct it. And I think when you mentioned the example of how the Meong Mangmi, in the absence of the Gub, she went to Punakha Domche, and there was an innovation in how the Meong Gyeok participated in a traditional festival that has happened for hundreds of years now, without necessarily, causing a big turmoil or a commotion. But she's continued to do that, and I think the gradual acceptance of that is also points us to a direction that we need to push the boundaries. We need to keep pushing it, as small as it may seem. I think we need to keep pushing. And so really, without taking too much time, I just want to once again thank all the participants. And as we leave this conversation with several more questions and some answers, I hope we can provide more platforms in the future to continue discussing this and many other important issues similarly. So on behalf of the Center for the Study of Democracy, University of Westminster, and the Center for Local Governance and Research here in Bhutan, On behalf of my colleague Tarshan and I, and our colleagues at the CSD UK, we thank everyone for participating in this important conversation. And to our viewers, we welcome your feedback, your comments, and in the coming weeks and days, we will be sharing this video online. And we hope that this conversation will add to the larger conversation that has been happening and will continue to happen. Thank you so much, and Kariche and Rashtile.